but I still feel, it's a very sad thing that happens. This has nothing to do with Russian collusion. This started as Russian collusion. This has absolutely nothing to do. This is a witch hunt, and it's a disgrace.
Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Rafael P. Roman. Tuesday was a significant day in the Trump presidency. Here in Manhattan, Michael Cohen, the president's former personal attorney, pleaded guilty to breaking campaign finance laws as well as to multiple counts of tax evasion and bank fraud. Cohen also admitted that payoffs made to two women to keep them silent about their affairs with President Trump were made at the direction of the president. Cohen now faces up to 65 years on all 8 counts when he is sentenced on December 12th. 24 hours later, the president took to Twitter to denounce his former attorney, saying, quote, "If anyone is looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen." And in Virginia, just moments after the Cohen guilty plea, Paul Manafort, the president's former campaign manager, was found guilty of 5 counts of tax fraud, 2 counts of bank fraud, and 1 count of failure to disclose a foreign bank account. The judge declared a mistrial on the remaining 10 counts. Manafort could face a maximum of 30 years. But that's not the end of Manafort's legal troubles. In September, he will face charges brought by the special counsel that include obstruction of justice, failure to register as a foreign agent, and conspiracy to launder money. If convicted, Manafort could face additional jail time and fines. Both Manafort and Cohen were convicted of federal crimes, and that gives the president the ability to pardon them, something that Cohen said he would never accept. The critical question, of course, is what will this all mean for the president? And joining us now with answers is former U.S. Attorney Kendall Coffey, who joins us from Miami. Mr. Coffey, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for including me.
Now, Mr. Coffey, could you summarize what happened with Manafort and Cohen yesterday beyond what I said in the introduction?
Well, you described it very well. It was a bad news day, no doubt, for President Trump. Although, ironically, neither of the verdicts in the case of Manafort or the guilty plea in the case of Cohen had anything to do with so-called Russia collusion. The Manafort issues all occurred essentially before he became campaign manager for Donald Trump and went back a number of years. With respect to Cohen, the issues occurred during the course allegedly occurred during the course of the campaign, but again, had nothing to do with Russia. Nevertheless, especially with respect to the Michael Cohen guilty plea, there have to be some concerns in the White House. Manafort, up to now, there's no indication that even if he now wanted to cooperate with the government to reduce his exposure to prison time, no indication that he has anything incriminating to say about President Trump, although Manafort was at the meeting at Trump Tower with a representative of the Russian government. So who knows whether there's something about that he might want to offer prosecutors. But with respect to Cohen, it was much more direct. And it was not only an accusation of Michael Cohen that the president was implicated in a payoff scheme that was intended, according to Cohen, to influence an election, which would, if it was undisclosed, make it a crime under federal campaign contribution.
I wonder if you could explain that to me. I mean, what Cohen did, and even if the president directed it to him, what's the difference between paying these women off to keep quiet? What's the difference between that and a run-of-the-mill non-disclosure agreement that people make all the time?
Well, it's an important question because presented as a federal crime, it's confusing to a lot of people. The theory as a campaign violation that the money was being expended in order to benefit a political campaign was a theory that was very controversial. The theory of the prosecution failed in that case. And
right, he was found innocent.
And it was widely discredited. Even so now, it's being brought back, apparently aimed at President Trump. And you think about it, does Michael Cohen really care what he pleads guilty to as long as it's something that affects his prison time? So it's one thing to get somebody to plead guilty to a theory of a campaign violation that is, by all accounts, a stretch. It's another thing to prove it in court, which of course they failed to do against John Edwards.
Well, so as you said, Mr. Coffey, neither of these cases have anything to do with Russian collusion, not even remotely. So what does that say about the special prosecutor's case regarding Russian collusion?
Well, they haven't proven it yet. And they've gone a lot of miles. They've interviewed enough witnesses to fill a small football stadium, more documents than you could pack into the Library of Congress, and they still haven't established the thesis of collusion. Doesn't mean they've given up on it. And it may be that a Michael Cohen or a Paul Manafort or somebody somewhere could still give them what they're looking for. But so far, it hasn't happened, and we've come a very long way in this investigation.
All right. Well, Mr. Coffey, we have to end it there. Thank you once again for joining us today.
Thanks for including me.